The reflection in the mirror was a stranger, a ghost with my eyes. My name is Eleanor, and for 15 years I had been an accessory, a backdrop to someone else's story, a shadow in my own house. And in that moment of quiet despair, Brian stormed into the hallway, his presence a sudden, sharp intrusion. "You're not seriously going to the wedding like that, are you?" he scoffed, his voice dripping with disdain. He didn't wait for me to answer. In his eyes, I looked like a plain gray mouse. To him, my existence was a routine, a convenience. And the moment I became inconvenient, I was invisible. This wasn't just a criticism. That night, after the front door slammed behind him, I sank onto the living room couch, the silence of the house a heavy blanket over me. The tears came then, not in a torrent of sobs, but in quiet, steady streams of pain and shame. The worst part wasn't what Brian said. It was the hollow, terrifying realization that somewhere deep down, I had come to believe he was right. I hadn't just been humiliated by my husband. I had, in some quiet, insidious way, betrayed the girl I used to be. The days that followed were a cold, quiet war. We moved through the house like strangers, speaking only in short, necessary sentences. I tried to talk to him once, twice. I told him I had a right to be his wife, that the wedding was about respect, not appearances. But each time he shut me down with a look, a dismissive snort, or a silence that was more potent than any shout. I wasn't going. He told them I was sick. That's that. I almost gave in. But then I saw my daughter, Helen. She was in her room, humming to herself as she carefully fixed a tiny dress onto her favorite doll. And in that moment, a burning question seared through me. What was I teaching her? What was I showing her every time I stayed quiet, every time I let her father diminish me? That shrinking was love? That silence was strength? The thought burned like a fire in my chest. I couldn't let my daughter grow up to be a woman who believed love looked like contempt. That night, I barely slept. I lay awake, rehearsing the words, holding on to the flicker of strength that had finally ignited inside me. By morning, it wasn't a flicker anymore. It was a steady flame. After the kids left for school, I waited for Brian in the kitchen. When he walked in, I met his eyes and spoke the words as calmly as I could. "I'm going to that wedding, Brian, and if you don't take me, I'll go myself." His expression shifted instantly from annoyance to disbelief, then to anger. He stood there staring, then let out a short, bitter laugh. "Fine, you win. But on one condition. You don't go with me. You take a cab and arrive 2 hours late. You come in quietly, sit at the back, and keep a low profile. I don't want your presence turning heads." A knot formed in my throat, but I nodded. It was insulting, but it was a victory. I called Mary, a friend who had watched me fade for years. She took Anna. Less than 30 minutes later, they arrived. Mary with a massive makeup case and Anna hauling several garment bags. Operation Cinderella began. I chose a dress of shimmering emerald green. I hadn't worn anything so beautiful since my wedding day. Anna chose strappy heels and a matching clutch. Then I looked at the mirror. Staring back at me wasn't the exhausted mother, the woman who had begged her husband for scraps of affection. It was me, the me I thought I'd lost, but brighter, stronger, radiating a quiet confidence I hadn't felt in so long. As I walked out the door that evening, I wasn't just heading to a wedding. I was stepping into a version of myself I hadn't known I still had. I was no longer afraid. As I approached the grand entrance, 2 security guards turned to glance at me. One straightened, the other blinked twice. I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirrored door, tall and composed, every strand of hair perfectly in place, my gaze steady. The moment I crossed the threshold into the ballroom, the noise seemed to drop. Dozens of voices, chatter, laughter, and the clinking of glasses suddenly faded into a hush. All eyes turned toward me in that enormous hall. Conversations halted. Someone dropped a fork. And there I stood, the woman who was never supposed to be noticed, who was told to stay invisible, the woman Brian was ashamed of. Now she was the center of the room. From across the ballroom, I spotted Brian standing near the groom, his boss, and a few high-ranking colleagues. He turned and saw me. His smile evaporated, his mouth slightly open, brows furrowed as if his brain couldn't quite register what his eyes were seeing. Before he could move, a tall, composed man with warm, intelligent eyes and hair slightly graying at the temples stepped into my path. He was Daniel Montgomery. He offered me a glass of champagne, and as I took it, his fingers brushed, a brief, warm contact. Daniel didn't leave my side for the rest of the night. He asked about my interests, not my husband. He listened when I told him I used to paint still lifes but hadn't touched a brush in years. When the music shifted to a slow waltz, Daniel extended his hand. Brian stood like a statue, arms crossed over his chest, his jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscles twitching. I placed my hand in Daniel's, and he led me onto the dance floor. His hand settled lightly at my waist, and for the first time in what felt like decades, I allowed myself to let go, to lean into someone's arms and just breathe. I heard whispers and low chuckles from Brian's colleagues. Brian's been hiding her all this time. She's stunning. The moment we stepped into the house, the explosion came. Brian's words burned me with new strength. Something inside me snapped. I wrenched my arm free, and for the first time in 15 years, I looked him straight in the eyes and didn't flinch. I'm filing for divorce. He laughed, a loud, sharp sound like a joke. You? And go where, Eleanor? With what money? Who's going to take care of you? He scoffed. The next morning, I woke with a dull ache in my arm, a faint red mark lingering like a stain. As I reached for my clutch, something small and stiff slid out. A card. Daniel Montgomery, with a phone number beneath his name. He must have slipped it into my hand so discreetly at the end of the night. Holding the card now, I felt something stir, something electric and dangerous. I shouldn't. I was still married, but I was also no longer living. I paced the kitchen, typing and deleting the same message over and over. Finally, I just wrote what I meant. Hi, it's Eleanor. Thank you for everything. I hit send and immediately regretted it. My heart pounded in my throat. Ding! His response came in less than a minute. Eleanor, I was hoping you'd reach out. I haven't been able to stop thinking about you. May I call you sometime? The next day, I packed quickly. Essentials only. Clothes, my old art supplies, a photo album. I left before Brian came home. For the first time in 15 years, I shut the door behind me and it felt like I was locking a cell from the outside. He helped me find a small, clean apartment. He bought my daughter, Helen, a reading nook and took my son, Mark, to soccer practice. Meanwhile, I, the gray mouse, signed up for graphic design classes at night. Every evening after tucking in the kids, I studied. I drew again. I designed. It felt like remembering how to breathe. My life was no longer built around surviving Brian's moods. It was built around becoming me again. One afternoon, nearly 2 years later, I was walking out of a cafe with Daniel and the kids. We were laughing about something, I don't even remember what. But as we stepped onto the sidewalk, I saw him, Brian. He was across the street, leaning against a lamppost, clothes wrinkled, face pale and sunken. He didn't say anything. He just stared.
And I knew he recognized what he had lost. Not just a wife, not just a family, but a life that could have been. He had thrown it all away for pride, for control, for ego. And now justice had been served, not by vengeance, but by life itself. He stood alone on that sidewalk watching the family he could have had disappear around the corner into a future he would never be a part of. And me? I never looked back.